Hi there, everyone. I'm Sean Tracy, the Technical Director of Content here at CIG, and today we wanted to talk a little bit about character customization. So to make that happen, I have with me Paul Reindel. Did you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Paul Reindel, and I'm the Director of Engineering for Persistent Universe. And with me, also...
Yep, I'm Josh Herman. I'm the Character Art Director.
Awesome. So to bring online character customization, you need a lot of different departments working together, and that's going to come from design, it's going to come from art, and it's going to come absolutely from the engineering side. So the first thing we did want to talk about was exactly what we're going to do for the next big release that we'll be giving out to you. And then what we're going to do moving forward. And today what we're going to discuss is what we'll term customization. So basically selecting items on your character and being able to customize what you're wearing, things like armor, things like clothing, things like weapons, and basically how we brought that system online. So maybe to give them a bit of background over how this system came to light was at the very base of it, the CryEngine or Lumberyard engine uses something called character definition files, or basically really just static geometries. So you've got a skeleton of a character and then you've got a bunch of geometries attached, right? The problem with that is that none of that can change at runtime. You can't switch out those attachments, changing things like the color of it, or even embedding things like gameplay logic within those pieces of geometry was not possible.
So it sounds like no customization at all was available.
No customization was available. It was all very static and it was very pre-authored. So it works really good for a game that has, maybe upwards of 20 characters or so. But a game like Star Citizen, which is an MMO, players are going to make their own characters. We're going to have hundreds and hundreds of different types of NPCs. It's not going to work very well for. Sure. So as the ships were being developed, and maybe Paul can talk a little bit about this, they had to come up with a system for ship customization, which was the first.
We basically had the same issue with ships. Like the vehicle system in CryEngine comes with predefined ships. They have predefined weapons. Obviously, we want to have like a customizable ship, so we built like a system called Item Port System, which allowed us to build vehicles in a completely modular system where you have like a base ship, and then you can attach turrets or weapons to it, and you can basically build your own customized ship out of it. And we thought, with that system already in place, why don't we take that and move it over and use it for character customization, to actually use the same system and be able to have like a base character, which is like basically a naked person, and then put on different armor pieces, different clothing, and even different weapons on that.
Yeah, so, and one of the tricky parts about that is, with a ship, things are very rigid in terms of, you attach this one gun here, there's no real deformation going on, it doesn't have to attach in any super special way, it's like, just align it to that helper and you're pretty much happy. But on the character side, it can become a little more difficult because we're talking about zones within the character, and everything on a character deforms. Everything's skinned to a skeleton.
Costumes are all going to be unique. You're going to have jackets that are going to have to fit over different types of things, armors that are going to have to fit over different types of things, helmets that don't necessarily fit, shoes that don't meet the pants. Like, you have all these kind of problems where it's when it is a deformable and very unique asset, whereas you're saying it's basically a port and an item going into that port. For the ship system, it's needs to be a little more flexible for the characters.
Right. So then what we had to do, obviously, was change out that default CryEngine or Lumberyard implementation. And over the course of many months, we've been working on this, and things are progressing really well. We basically load a skeleton. That particular skeleton's sitting right there. It can animate and do everything it needs. And technically that character is loaded, there's just no actual geometry that's showing it. So in the loadout editor here, you can see that I have an item port, and it's called the body item port. And this is what supports a bunch of different items. So within the items, you can see we've got female bodies, we've got male bodies. So right now I'm just gonna load up one of the male bodies, and we've just got two very different ones in terms of their skin tone. And before I get too much further, I want to attach a head just to show you how we do skeleton extensions, and that the base skeleton actually gets built up upon. So what I do is the body actually carried a whole bunch of item ports with it by itself. Maybe I'll make these a little bigger so you can see it. And the one I'm really interested in is this head item port. So as soon as I select that head item port, it actually tells me what items, are valid for that particular port. And we set this all up through types, subtypes, and sort of rules. So you can see we've got a lot of different character heads. And in this case, I'm going to select, the male tier 1, male 09 tier 1, which is the one that everybody's kind of used to within the PU. But we'll happily change that around a little bit. So I'm just going to add some eyes onto him, so he gets a little set of eyes. And now let's go ahead and turn off the skeleton debug here. So here's our guy. So he's loaded up. And one of the things that we're working on right before we give you a character creation is this seam between the neck and the body. Because we have our heads all scanned from actual people, and our body itself actually wasn't a body scan. This was actually just modeled by one of our very talented character artists. What we have to do is align those two so that there's no seaming in there. And what can be confusing but also very powerful within the situation is the dynamic hierarchy that it kind of creates. So like we have the skeleton, then we add that naked body on top, and then on that naked body there's a certain number of ports. It's got clothing ports for t-shirts and whatever else, but it's also got another port called the armor port.
The way our game is designed is we have the undersuit, and then on top you can like layer different armor plates and so on. And that's also just like another item port on top of the undersuit item port. So I have the undersuit item port, and then I can go and give him like different leg plates here. So I can really customize my character. And since the art is all like set to work with each other, I can now actually even go further and put stuff, attachments on my armor. So there's like different armor item ports here for like grenades, for example. So I put a little grenade in here. So yeah, and I mean, as you can see, this completely allows me to completely customize and randomize my whole player.
Now, initially doing this, of course, some of the assets weren't really set up to be as modular as they could be.
Sure.
So what were some of the challenges that you ran into when we were trying to put all this stuff together all of a sudden?
Sure. Some of the easy ones are when we start putting up together all different types of art. Shirts or pants and shoes is the easiest example. So if I have high tops and I have shorts, that's going to be a very distinct difference in between the two. But then if I have pants that are going to go longer, not all sudden things start colliding.
Yeah.
And if those aren't set up early, basically what we've started to create is zones or regions or boundaries, depending what you want to call them, to help us make sure that everything's going to line up. Mm-hmm. The other things is maybe say somebody's got a weapon on, and they want to take that off, this armor piece off. Does the weapon go away, or does the weapon now does it go down a level, mm-hmm. and does it get to stay there? And that's also a gameplay implementation as well. Should you be able to put armor on or a weapon on whatever's underneath that?
Right.
So all these kind of things where it's like we can add it on there, but it's also, does it look good visually? Does it work for the gameplay? Mm-hmm. And then does it also make sense for the tech to even have to do that?
Sure, and that's always there's always a point of contention in there. It's like, who really says where that gun is meant to go? Because design will say all the time, yeah, we want to move it around wherever. But sometimes they'll put it up on the shoulder. It just looks ridiculous there, or on the back, or that doesn't work with that armor. So there's always an interesting, I think, interplay between the art as well as the design needs. So there's constant iteration on this. Maybe a little.
There's also like the technical aspect of design and artists. They come like, oh, we want to have all those different layers, but then again, like now you multiply your draw calls because you have like layer on top of layer on top of layer, and that's why also this like zone system Josh just mentioned like really helped us. Having like defined zones and then layers on top of layers on different zones allowed us to basically take one layer which is underneath and just cull it out on the mesh level, so we like save all those draw calls which you don't see anyways, and like having a defined zone system really helped.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting this
like the balance between the tech and the art. Art is always going to want to push it and make it as much as possible, and design wants to do the same typically, as much as possible, as cool as possible, and then you run into the performance problem where you're saying, oh, now you've added so much stuff that the game can't run, or this character is 20 times more expensive than the basic character, which turns into a problem.
Sure. And it's happened.
And it has happened, yeah.
Right?
And so now how do you, with some cool systems like the zone stuff, is that it does actually give us quite a bit of leeway, and I'm going to break down that with you guys in a concept. We can break them down pretty easily. So both of these have a jacket, which is this piece right here. Both of these have shirts, which would be this piece right here. And then we have a pant. Looks like this guy's probably wearing some kind of a glove, and both have boots. Now, this is all exactly what we talked about, right? So this t-shirt, we'll actually be making the t-shirt, if it's a t-shirt or a tank top, all the way into this area. Same with this, if it's a long sleeve or whatever it is. We'll be building it all the way out, but when we put this cardigan on, it'll actually be culled out all the way over here. So all this will go away, which is pretty cool because then we don't have to worry about it. Like we said, we get big performance savings, and it's just really actually a lot of freedom for the artist, which is really cool. Now, one thing we were talking about before, which is actually a challenge, is pants. The challenge is actually where any two zones are going to meet, because that's where you have two things colliding, right? Now, let's say I have a pair of boots like this, and I have a pair of short boots or pant shoes like this. And I drag these over, and you'll see that maybe I didn't change these pants out. What's going to actually happen is this would all be skin, right? But the challenge that we have here is that, first off, that looks a little weird. And then second, the model that we made for these pants is built to look like it's tucked into boots. So if we have that problem, now this creates a problem where we have a piece of clothing that we've created that doesn't necessarily fit in all of our scenarios. And we want to make sure that all of our characters are built to be able to fit within a system where it's easily swappable and easily modular. And the biggest thing that I'm actually most excited for this was NPCs. So right now, when you look at any of the NPCs you see, they're all pretty much the same guy, unfortunately. But when we get into randomly spawning them, we'll be able to select from certain types of clothes and certain groups. And because all of our assets will be able to blend seamlessly together, we'll be able to spawn them really quick and really, really easily, because you'll just be able to select from anything, and all the shoes will work with the pants, all the pants will work with the shoes, all the shirts will work with the jackets, etc.
And it does sound like a very simple thing that, oh, okay, when I put a t-shirt on, well, just get rid of that whole torso. But we ran into some great, edge cases between there. And again, I think it comes from, having assets that were built beforehand that we're now supporting within a sort of modular system. So, I mean, there was clever things, sort of like when you've got a t-shirt. So how much of that body do you want to cull? And we actually had to separate those zones down. And I can't remember the exact number, but there's around 20, just over 20. And even zones that split up, say, the upper arm, for example, because sometimes we have t-shirts like the one I'm wearing here, but sometimes we have ones that go down past the elbow. Sure, like and then sometimes we have a full arm shirt. So you don't want to keep drawing all this stuff underneath. And the other tricky part about that is you would think that you would just be able to layer the clothing like you would in real life, so that I put a shirt on and then I put a jacket over that and everything's going to look right. Well, not really, because when the topology doesn't match, so let's say I put a jacket on top of this shirt and literally the edges of the topology don't line up, when it deforms, they're not going to deform in the same way. So what ends up happening is you might not get clipping when you're standing, but as soon as the guy animates, boom, it's all popping out everywhere.
Terrible, yeah.
So, and there's never really anything you can do about that if you do not keep your topology consistent, which we don't necessarily have on the shirts because it's a bit restrictive if you have to do that. So with the zone culling coming online, not only did it fix the clipping problem, but it also fixed our performance problem, which was a super duper powerful thing to have.
Super cool.
But it also put constraints on your work, right? Because
does.
artists, they usually like just work and make everything look cool, but then with a system like that, they start to get like, okay, you have to build this, but this section, for example, always have to be exactly at that line, and then so it puts some restrictions on your work.
But I think that's part of why we had 20 zones on the body. Is like, it's not just you can only have shirt or short sleeves or no shirt. Like we have way more than that. So we can play within the zones a little bit so that we don't want to get too close to where it clips or you see holes in the mesh, but you also have enough to where you can, get something still that's pretty cool looking. So it's not, pretty much I think we can come up with anything at this point, and we still get super good savings and
Yeah,
good too.
and one last really good example within it, because a lot of people maybe are thinking of a layering structure so that you would always have pretty consistent assets. So a jacket that was always closed, okay, great, that's always going to call out the stuff. But guess what? We actually have jackets that go on top on the third layer that are wide open. So that means, what if I don't have that T-shirt on underneath that jacket? I got to show the chest then, but the T-shirt was culling the chest. So then how do I make sure the chest is there with that jacket on? So there's a lot of little logic within there that has to get all worked out. And we worked most of it out anyways.
And something that's really cool about that, though, is like that we do that I don't know if I've seen other people do, is like, maybe they have, but like if I buy a jacket in some other games and it's an open jacket, they just replace the shirt underneath.
Sure, they just
and you
give
get
you
your own, you get just a generic shirt. Whereas with ours, you can wear that jacket with a T-shirt
any
underneath,
shirt.
or shirtless, like
or
shirtless,
shirtless,
but with a jacket.
Look like, you know, I call it
Fabio.
the Fabio look,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you know, yeah, it's,
can do that too.
It's pretty fun.
So it actually adds a lot of customization within that, to where we can start layering much more than we were with just like, okay, you're making an open jacket and a closed jacket and a T-shirt, and so you get a lot more.
Yeah, so a lot of questions that present themselves, and sometimes I go down this road with the designers, but we have to explain the hierarchy of how this works out a little bit. We have, just as Paul explained, this naked body, and then on the naked body, we have clothing that can get attached to it. So then we have this layering, so that clothing starts hiding that naked body. But then on top of it, we have another layer of the hierarchy, which is the armor. So the armor hides all the clothing, which hides all the body, right? So now we keep building up on it. And it might be worth explaining how we've split up the armor into less granular zones than the 20 or 30. We still have that technique, but we have whole items anyways. So maybe if you want to.
Yeah, sure. So when we're going to put on armor, and one of the things that we're defining right now as armor is an undersuit. So an undersuit basically means you're going to be able to go into space with it. So you can put on a helmet and you can go into space, EVA, jet around, and you should be fine.
So an undersuit is kind of your
It's almost
chest.
like a
Full
chest.
body.
yeah,
onesie.
yeah, it's like a frame.
So what that does is it puts on, and you can still see the player's head, hair, face, all that kind of stuff. But then on top of that, now you put your helmets and you put your chest pieces, your arm pieces, and your leg pieces. So right now we've split it up into 4 because it's just easy to assemble. It's easy. With less zones, like we were kind of talking about before, you have way more free play for the art. Because I don't have to say, like, if this line on my arm is where I'm going to have a zone, all the gloves, everything is always going to have to end at this line. And it will look a little weird, and you'll see it in some other games. It doesn't call itself out until you see it.
Yeah.
But you'll see all the gloves go to here. All the boots and the pants like mash at one line. So if we remove those lines, we can have a lot more free play in that art. So we have a little bit less there.
Right.
But also it allows for gameplay for design. So we can put how many weapons go on a chest piece, on a core piece. And does that get bigger and better as you go up light, mediums, and heavies? And then tech within the helmets and all that kind of stuff within the legs and arms as well.
So within this, we've talked a little bit about how the art is developed. So let's talk a little bit about how the tech actually works in terms of, okay, so we've got this hierarchy, and then we have these character items. So this is all part of the item 2.0 entries that we've talked about with the community quite a bit. So we have all these items that are all predefined, but within those items, there can be gameplay components on them. So there's a couple components that are being developed for the character side. Did you want to talk at all about any one of those?
Well, I mean, for like the first thing we did, taking what like originally CryEngine Camps was like what you said, like the static character definition file, and like split each piece out, and we just made them items. So they're interchangeable. And then we already had the item pod system for ships, so we just took the same thing and basically made, okay, those pieces which you usually define in one static file are now just items which you put together. And that allows us to give each item different game values. So for example, for our chest pieces, we give them different mass values, and then the game code just takes the overall mass of your attached items, and that calculates how fast you run. So now we have the ability, design has the ability to give like each individual item different mass values, and that gives like them the ability to, okay, make a fast player or a slow player. And then it also allows us to build rules So the item mod system comes with a rule set which says, okay, on this port you can only wear like a heavy weapon or a light weapon or like a small weapon and this type of armor class and whatever. And with this system now we can basically build like, okay, if you have a heavy armor, like obviously it's slow, but you can carry like the bigger and heavier weapons. And that all like works because we have like componentized all those into items.
Right, right. And then on the performance front, that's a better thing because again, we can do scheduler updates type thing. We can make it so that they're not all updating all the time. It's all very controllable.
Yes, and then still for our characters, still even if they are like now split into different items, we under the hood we're using the skin mechanics, which basically is still on the rendering side. We merge everything into one skin, and like since they all use the same material, we even if it's split like in logical items on the rendering side, it's still one thing which we can draw in like one go. So it's still very optimal and good for performance.
Right, this unified seat render
Yes.
proxy piece of the character. What's another benefit of that, by the way, is something that we have to deal with on the tech art quite often, which is on the tech art side quite often, is the LODs and the culling of that. So one thing that can be tricky with a character, if he's made up of a whole bunch of different attachments, they're all various sizes, and usually our level of detail culling is based on either a bounding box size or distance or an average poly size. And if they're all sort of popping and doing things at different rates, what happens is on those edges that you talked about, all of a sudden there's breakage in those seams. So it's important to keep that as one unified piece. And actually up until now, just a good example that came off the top of my head was that the helmets were separate. These were a bone attachment, right? So, and I'm sure people have seen this within Star Marine, is that they're shooting at somebody, he's running away, and all of a sudden the helmet disappears and he's just running around in space with, no helmet on and his face out doing Star-Lord or whatever. So, we've changing those over the skin files, and then that'll combine with the render proxy, and then all of a sudden we're rendering, LODing and calling out all at the same time, which is the best way to do it, of course, I think, in my opinion. So a little bit deeper into the tech, some people might wonder how exactly we manage a skeleton like this. So in most games, and it's a dramatic difference to how somebody would develop a movie, every single character in a movie tends to get their own rig. So it's a very, very bespoke rig. They've got whole departments of riggers that are just building up these skeletons for every single character. However, in a game, it's the polar opposite. You want one skeleton for everything as much as possible. Problem with that is that you've got to carry all those joints around. So we've actually, we've had a system within CryEngine Lumberyard. Now, it wasn't used in any shipped game yet.
Like you're talking about skeleton extension, yeah.
So, and what the system does is that we can have a base skeleton, but we can
add
additional joints to the skeleton at runtime, and when there's duplication of those joints, they'll shear off basically those duplication of joints and just extend it to the new one. So what this gives us the ability to do is modify the skeleton hierarchy itself at runtime, meaning I put that chest piece on, and all of a sudden I've got a new joint with that new helper just on that chest piece, and that's where the weapon will go. So rather than saying, I'm gonna carry around a skeleton that has a helper here, and I'm using helper 22, for that armor piece, it's actually coming in automatically with that. So was there anything more that I've missed maybe on scale extensions or challenges within
you kind of touched on the key points. I think the key points is really to keep the joint count in the base like as low as possible, and then every piece which comes on top, which comes with additional joints, can come with its own joint. And then there's very smart people in Frankfurt, our animation engineer who built the system which allows us to like combines those bones, the skeletons, into one single skeleton, and still all the animations will work. And that allows us exactly what you just mentioned. We can have like one armor piece which has like two bones here for attachments for grenades, and then another armor piece which has them here, and it still works, and we don't have to carry like 4 bones for that. It's still 2 bones, but they are in different locations in each piece.
Exactly. And the nice part is it all becomes data driven, really, and that's the key to this entire system, is that it was meant and it needs to be scalable as much as possible.
Well, it's data-driven, but it gives the designer more freedom to, instead of having, I always have to put the gun on this position because that's how the system works. He can place the thing wherever he wants, and then obviously
Yeah.
you have to use the same item port, but then on one armor piece the weapon is maybe here, and on another one it's a little bit more here, and it still aligns, and it gives the artist
Yeah,
a
which
lot
I
of
love,
freedom.
because now we can do any shape and size and put stuff wherever we want, and you guys can just scale extend to that location,
Exactly.
which is awesome.
Yeah, and yeah, it's definitely very powerful. It's nice.
Do scale extensions affect like non-armor clothing, like just casual clothing, social clothing, or anything like that?
Absolutely. So, though the design is still up in the air, not up in the air necessarily, we know people are going to have weapons on their civilian clothes at some point.
Yeah.
But there is no combat right now when you're outside of armor. But it would absolutely apply to those civilian clothes. Where it applies even more, and this was a next topic I wanted to talk a little bit about, was simulation and secondary motion really on
secondary
a
animation,
character.
simulation, yeah.
So that's where this gets really powerful, because if I was to say attach a cape to a character, that cape is going to need bone chains, and it's probably going to need a good, 5 bone chains across, probably 10 long. That's a lot of joints all of a sudden to be carrying around on your base skeleton. But if you can attach it with the asset that's coming in, you've saved that much off your base skeleton. So that's where we really abuse it, is when that simulation comes into play.
And the modularity even helps more with that, because like what you just said, like this cape, it needs to collide something with your body, and then usually in most games, how they do it, they have like a predefined area, and that makes it always kind of look the same shape. For us, since we put everything into different modules, each piece can come with its own collider zone. So you can make like a very fat, whatever, chest piece, which just comes with its own collider zone, and then the cape will still work and collide with that, and will collide different with that like big, heavy chest versus like a thin, light chest piece. So.
Sure. And yeah, we abuse this on not just things like capes, things like hair, jackets. The Sand Nomad that was within the Homestead demo was one of the best usages I think of it that we've had so far. So definitely an interesting thing.
We're really excited about the degree of variety this tech is going to bring our players. Wanted to leave you guys with a little bit of a video showing off some of the features. So thanks again, and thanks for watching.
I hope you guys enjoyed this very work in progress and behind the scenes look of the character system and how you, as players, are going to be outfitting and customizing your character. Now, no character customization system is complete without something to make unique faces, and in a future ATV, we're going to discuss this a lot more. Before then, however, I wanted to leave you with a technical demonstration done by our partners 3Lateral of the potential of runtime facial technology to create millions of unique faces. This is the last piece of what we need for character customization, and we are super excited that it's finally getting to a stage where we can start integrating it into Star Citizen. We hope you enjoy, and if you want to see more of the DNA system and 3Lateral's technical presentation, go to the link below. Thanks a lot, guys, and see you in the verse.